Over the past few years, everything has changed. Where and how we work and live, the way we collaborate and measure success, and the emerging technologies we use to get it all done. Welcome to The Bridge. Join our host, Scott Kinka, in a series of discussions with top leaders in technology and learn about how they bridge their lives and their businesses into our new hybrid work and AI-driven reality. Our hope is that the insights and experiences will help you on your journey in business and in life from who we were to who we are today. And maybe it'll help you get better prepared for whatever comes next. The Bridge is a service of Bridgepoint Technologies, the nation's leading IT advisory firm. Bridgepoint helps business leaders evaluate, procure, implement, and manage technology and customer experience solutions with a focus on realizing sustainable results for your business growth. And now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
Is AI just the new cloud? Interesting question. Buzzwords abound. But what's truthful is that CEOs and boards of directors are insisting that business leaders and IT leaders move to take advantage of this new technology, in many cases without there really being a fully vetted use case. After an insane reception to last week's episode, we're back this week with part 2 of our practical discussion about AI, filmed live at Bridgepoint's Tech Summit 2023 in beautiful and warm Palm Springs, California. The talk, titled, "Is This How the World Ends or How Smarter Business Begins?" features 4 industry leaders. Dan O'Connell, Chief AI and Strategy Officer of Dialpad, Karen Bowman, Vice President of Channels and Alliances at Level AI, Tushar Shah, Chief Product Officer at Uniphore, and Raghu Ravinutala, CEO of Yellow AI. Last week, the 5 of us attempted to agree on the definition and potential issues with AI. We even inspected ChatGPT's definition of itself as a backdrop. This week, we get real. How are businesses using the technology today, and where is this technology going in the future? If you feel we're helping you as an IT leader to think about the future of IT here on The Bridge, please give us a like, comment, rate, or a follow on your favorite podcast platform. But now, check out this exclusive look into our discussion and Q&A with 450 top technologists in the room on this episode of The Bridge. Let's just do rapid fire. Is the singularity near?
I think the singularity is near because it actually impacts biology. The fact that AI is now moving into the biological ecosystem with DNA manipulation and those types of things, this concept of superhumans. So it may not be the machine that takes over, but there could be superhumans thinking a little bit of, if we want to think out of the box, Captain America, right? Getting that injection of that a saline solution and now becoming the scrawny guy about being Captain America. That's essentially what AI is looking at and potentially now bringing in. How do you potentially manipulate DNA?
Okay, so you're a yes, Raghu.
No, I believe it's long way away. Singularity. As you know, I think the largest application that we are working on is LLMs. And if you just break down what's an LLM, it's a next word predictor at the end of it, right? And we have been working on AI research for the last 30 years. It's very hard to get large, highly adopted AI applications, and we are seeing for probably the first time at such scale with LLMs, and getting to singularity and getting to this kind of superhuman intelligence would need a ton of adoption. It's probably not just about the basic algorithms, but how well things are getting adopted. So you keep collecting data and improving. I believe that's quite some long way away.
We might as well. Let's just get everybody's score on this one. We'll see who wins. Karen, go ahead.
I'll chime in on this one because, first of all, I was a physics major, so singularity meant to me the thing that happened after the event horizon, which is the death of a star or black hole. So I'm like, I don't know, maybe that does relate to AI. So I looked it up and wikied it, right? And it is kind of that when this technology takes that next step to start developing things that we couldn't even possibly think of or do, and somewhat, autonomously. So I think there could be things we can't even imagine that could come from that singularity and that bias. And at the end of the day, when you're building these models, you're training them, you're giving them the data and the input to use. So I think there's a good long time where we're going to have a lot of practical applications for automating things, doing, deeper analytics than we've ever been able to do before, and providing, true value based on that back to our customers. So I think for the strategists and the folks here, like those are the concepts that I think are important to drill down with customers is, yes, there's this hype. Yes, there's things that we've learned about called a singularity used in a different context, but there's also, here's real world, outcomes that you can get. If you do 100% auto scoring on all your agents, for example, we had a customer, they went from 30 minutes to find something to score to 5 minutes. That's 6x more productivity. So I think that's where, this conversation becomes real for all of us.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's possible, probably not near. So I agree with Raghu.
You're in the middle.
I'm in the middle. But
if you're keeping score, we didn't come to an answer, by the way. We don't have agreement one way or the other here, but fire away.
Yeah, I think what's important is every technological step always takes more time and is harder than we initially think on the hype.
Yeah.
And I think we are really enamored by large language models. I think rightfully so. I think there's some really practical use cases we're already seeing. But you can look back at autonomous driving. Like we thought 10 years ago that autonomous driving would be solved. And it turns out that that's a really difficult problem to go and solve, whether it's in an urban environment, let alone if you're driving on rural roads and can actually map the road.
Yeah.
So I think these things are, they're possible, but they're going to take more time. In our lifetime, I think there's a good shot at it.
Yeah. I probably should have just leveraged how the singularity is being used as a term around AI. Ray Kurzweil was talking about it in a book called The Singularity is Near 20 years ago. But this is basically the moment at which AI moves from being, referential to self-referential, meaning it wakes up and knows it exists as opposed to just executing our commands. And we'll leave that there. I think the fun behind this for the science fiction nerds in the room, me included, right? I love that. It's just, it may get there. We probably just won't know. It's really the issue, right? It's going to be like, hey, I woke up today.
Well, think if it creates different dynamics and decides that humans could be useful to it in a different way, classic, like the Matrix, right? We could all be batteries. That would be a good thing. Let's plug them all in. They won't even know, So I think those are things that are postulated and possible. But, I agree. I think it's a ways off, but maybe not as far as we think.
Okay. All right, and this is, I have RoboCop up here, but I pulled the quote, right? Development of autonomous weapons that can make decisions without human intervention raises concerns about the potential of AI to be used in warfare and other disruptive applications. And I'm not going to dig into that so much as just, this is where we cross into the regulatory threshold. All right. So, Tushar, we already have you saying you are supportive of legislation. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on here, and then we'll all unpack it together?
Yeah, I think for us, it's more about ensuring that bias doesn't exist. This is a significant moment from a technology. It's almost like you said, cloud, mobile, the web, all rolled into one, and now we've got this super just explosion of technology enablement.
Yeah.
You look at what happened with like ChatGPT-2. The biases that existed when you put in what does a white male do, what does a white female do, and the response back, based on the data that it consumed, the knowledge it was able to consume. So for us, as we think about the execution of work that we do with our clients, like I said, making sure that they can actually explain, they understand where the data came from, the explainability, the ability to actually trust the information that they've consumed, the knowledge that they've incorporated into their ecosystem is extremely important. And I think that data lineage and understanding that is going to be a critical point to the regulatory landscape, right? Because I think you see it even now, right? OpenAI came out, immediately there were lawsuits in California saying, hey, you didn't have authorization to my data, like where did you get it, how did you get it, so on and so forth, right? And so as we now move into this realm of understanding, that's why, like I said, I think it's important when you think about the enterprises that you interact with and the suppliers, those suppliers that have large swaths of customers in different industries, to your point, can not only just not have to just leverage large language models to a certain degree, but actually can leverage the data that they have, that they've obviously tokenized, they've obviously kept secure, because there's a way to actually show that lineage that said, hey, to a regulator, here's how we made a credit-based decision, for example, or how we made a decision on whether a customer got an upgrade or not, so on and so forth. And we actually have that explainability. I think it's going to become extremely important.
Yep.
Because the fact is, it's just like technology, right? So much of, to the point that Raghu is making, there's a small community or a large community of people that are somewhat trained to go do this, but the larger population actually doesn't understand the bits and the bolts, the ones and the zeros that actually went into actually creating that. And when you think about it, if you embrace the regulatory, then you actually are part of the regulatory conversation and decision versus pushing back against it, right? You see so many times where companies try to push back and the regulators squeeze even harder, right?
Sure.
Because they're like, hey, what are you hiding? Why are you not part of this? Why do you not want to solve this and understand the common algorithm here that ultimately everybody needs to understand why you made the decisions you made?
And personally, I agree with where you are. I think the challenge, and I'll throw this out, if anybody else wants to add in on that answer also while I throw this other question out there, great. But the bad guys don't care about the regulations on AI, and they have access to the same large language models. Like, how do we normalize those two things, really, at the end of the day? Anybody else? Okay.
Well, I always look at this question as, what's like one of the worst things, atomic weapons. So, and do we have regulation on that? Yes. Do we try to figure out who else can do this and do that? Yes. And will we potentially have to develop ways to combat that? Yes, because I don't think, given world current events, this is going to change human behavior anytime soon. So I love to think of all the positive things, but I think we need to be cognizant that in the wrong hands, with a different bias or perspective of the world, a lot of stuff could happen. And then how do you regulate that? Do you look at who's buying those NVIDIA chips, right? Do you look at, what other types of things they're producing? But I think that to Tushar's point, there needs to be something out there. And even if there isn't, as even us as a country, we need to be aware that this could be creating super chemical weapons. This could be creating nanotechnology weapons. I mean, you could get way out there on it, but I don't think we should sit back and just say, oh, this is cool and fun, and not be attuned to the fact that it could be problematic.
Yeah, the things I would add, I think these are all fantastic points, is, there's always this balance of innovation versus regulation and protection. And that's always a challenge. On the regulation side, I really would like to see not just unilateral decisions, but ones that have buy-in from everybody around transparency around models. I think the onus is really on companies to be clear around, here's the data, here's how we leverage it, here's what's being used. If they have other parties that they're sending the data to, everyone should know that. Is your data being used and trained on? So I think the regulation for personally what I care about is just transparency for all of us as consumers. And then, if you get into some of the other comments that Karen had, I think it is on both a combination of regulation on the GPU providers, so NVIDIA, the AMDs, Intels of the world, to say it can't just be software protection, right? You can't just say, hey, our large language model is never going to answer how to make the anthrax, because you can go to Google today and have that same question pop up and get a similar answer. So I think there's a software layer that needs to get regulated, and there's also a hardware layer. And so provides me some reassurance that at least NVIDIA and AMD and Intel are having those conversations as well.
Fantastic. Raghu?
Yeah, so regulation, absolutely. I think it's here, and it's probably paramount, both post and pre-facto, because a really bad event can happen, and we can explain the bad event, but a lot of regulation probably is needed to not make that event happen as well. Similarly, take an example of GDPR, just making sure that upfront there's privacy that's kind of guarded for individuals. So similarly, I think the one part of the regulation is going to be about where the responsibility lies. Something bad happens, is it the implementer of the AI, or is it the model creator, or the end user? And a lot of this regulation, unlike historically been, which is on paper, I believe the AI regulation is going to exist in terms of AI software that would go and check all the systems that are using AI, that go through these checks, whether seriously threatening events have a clear human trail intervention before those events are triggered, before these biases come in. So I believe, and that's why it's even more important that companies like us and all the AI companies kind of work towards in creating this regulation. And in my opinion, I think the regulation has to be in terms of software, not written documents.
Got it.
And that's I was going to say, his point is a really pertinent one, which is part of the intention around regulation is to drive accountability, which is if the system does something wrong, who do we get to point the finger at? And as humans, that's what we want. We want to know that somebody is accountable for what's happening. And so,
we could be on this one forever. So I'm going to just jump ahead a couple of slides, and then we're going to open this up for questions. So for our runners, if you get ready, we're going to come to you in about 5 minutes. Let's talk about some real-world applications, okay? And so this is a chart from Gartner. Certainly don't need you to read, but I think if you are paying attention to it out there, you'll find that one of the areas where the practical applications are largely happening, like we're gravitating towards democratized use of the tools, people on ChatGPT, improve it, and in the business sense, much of the dollars are moving into customer experience. So I guess the question is sort of a two-part question, and I'll let everybody grab this one. Why is everybody moving towards customer experience? Is that just because we feel differently about customer interaction post-pandemic and the technology and the moment just seem to meet? Or is it really that AI is that well-tuned to do that job first of all the jobs we want it to do? And then just sort of talk about your business and how you guys are approaching that in that vein. Give us a real-world story. So we'll just go right down the line. We'll start here and we'll go that way.
Yeah, so I think, we focus, Dialpad, we're a customer intelligence platform, just for the 2-minute spiel. So we can power communications on any device. I talk about us as we can understand those conversations to go drive automation, assistance, or insights. And for us, we focus a lot on the sales and customer success or support side because that's ultimately the fastest way and the way to drive revenue for a business. You ever help a business figure out how to churn less or sell more? In a macro environment today, obviously, it is harder to sell more as it is to go and take an install base and drive efficiency there. And I think, again, that we've talked a little bit about these applications for AI and these technologies are really pertinent and can up-level both the sales experience and the customer success experience, whether it's automating the quality assurance process, whether it's inferring customer satisfaction from any conversation so nobody has to ever send out a survey. I think these are all very real-world examples that are easy to pull off, that are simple to talk about for all of you as you engage with different businesses and provide very real businesses or very real value to the businesses that are out there.
Karen?
Yeah, I would agree totally. And I think some of it is too, in our, more modern technological world, and maybe some of it driven by the pandemic. I never bought anything off of Wayfair until the pandemic, right? Then I couldn't go anywhere. So I think that customer service, it's really, the modern front door to most businesses. And there's, a ton of, investment and money put into it. And, generally speaking, one of the largest expenses is the human capital, right? The human beings doing it. So when you look at that and how do we get better? How do we get better at doing that? And you take some of the simple things like call summarization, right? And this can get into bias in a different way. So if an agent summarizes the end of an interaction in a call, that's the agent's perspective, right? So now we can have AI summarize a call with much less bias to what happened, with the factual things that the natural language understanding of the words and the intent of the words that were said. So that gives you a much more accurate summary of what happened than potentially an agent. The other thing is auto scoring. If you have to go in a large contact center with tens of thousands, who knows, hundreds of thousands of interactions, to go find what to score, it's almost like, why do they bother, because it's going to be such a slanted subset of what's happening. And you can even look at simple things like that. We had a customer, they were only able to get to 4% of their interactions. It's actually Global Faces. They do a lot of fundraising types of things. So they were able to get 75% more reviews that happened, which led to more coaching, better understanding of the agent, how to handle calls. And in 1 year, they realized an ROI on just that of $24 million in revenue. So these are real things that you can go to your clients with and talk about. And the CX space is just ripe with it. And I think yesterday, Prater and Kassan did a really good presentation of talking about, hey, think of everything that your customer is looking at and buying. This is like the tip of the spear for you, right? You get in there with this conversation and the front door to their customers, and you will win the draw and the pool through business, because this is that critical to them, and it's become much more critical, I think, since the pandemic. More people have really, gravitated to that online.
We shared quite a bit of data in the opening session and the keynote yesterday about sort of the top priorities CEOs have for IT are not really IT projects anymore, with the exception of cybersecurity. It's, make me more efficient, improve customer experience, do these things. That, I think, to your point, is a little bit of sort of the result of the pandemic. I mean, the buyer sentiment and expectation is different, but also the elevation of the IT guy who's now sitting next to the CEO being asked to solve business problems is very different than pre-pandemic in a lot of ways. But let's keep down the chain here, Tushar.
So, I think we're somewhat unique in the fact that we've got 3 product sets, right?
Yep.
One is we believe in a Q for sales opportunity, which I think plays to the right hand of this graph, which is more around machine learning sentiment analysis for sales. Mm-hmm. We think that ultimately, especially post the pandemic and during the pandemic, obviously people are traveling less, and therefore being able to actually support sales teammates and agents using technology and AI to drive sales opportunities is an area which was our Q for sales product. And then obviously within our U framework of customer service and engagement, just like Karen and everybody else mentioned, clearly that ability to support the customer, but also the agent and be a cockpit to the agent during that customer engagement. And I think as a buyer of this type of technology, one of the big reasons is, to your point, it's not only the gateway to your company and how you support the customer, but it drives loyalty and retention. Yeah. Clearly, the cost to actually acquire a new customer is so great for many enterprises. The ability to actually create a great customer experience when your potential product didn't perform the way it needed to, which ultimately drove a reason for the call, to be able to then drive that great experience, leveraging tools, either through self-service or when an agent actually is engaged, provide that agent the knowledgeable information to be able to fulfill that customer's inquiry, and then maybe even drive it to then a sales opportunity is obviously the benefit that, for example, we do at Uniphore. And then the third big thing for us is, as I mentioned, the data, right? We fundamentally believe that without helping the enterprise solve their data problems, you can't get the other stuff done. And 100%. So when we think about our UCapture and our Extreme product, that is about essentially the consumption of unstructured data, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoint, PDF, being able to consume that, take in applications and platforms, video, all of those types of things, structure it in a way that then begins and builds your knowledge set. I think that somewhat sets us apart because we actually have that layer of and then ultimately, when you think about call recording from a compliance and regulatory perspective, that is also a big demand out there as well. And so that we satisfy all of those areas.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important, the third point is a really important point to make. You hit me because I was about to ask you that question. Like, how often are you having to solve the data problem before? I mean, it's a really important thing that these technologies will do all the things that we're talking about, everything we see on the screen. You still have to solve the problem of, does the customer have everything you want to inform the AI written down someplace? I mean, right at the end, is it in a document that can be consumed to actually inform this? I'm going to throw that to Raghu, though, if you would answer the question the same way and layer in anything else you like.
I think the fundamental principle of scaling any technology is whether there is going to be massive user adoption and are they going to love it. And I think what ChatGPT has proven and what every enterprise sees, that users are absolutely loving automated chat interfaces. Mm-hmm. They want that. And enterprises are better suited, and it's kind of obvious. It doesn't need a lot of intelligence out there to say that if I'm going to provide ChatGPT kind of automated interfaces, virtual assistants to my end customers, the adoption is going to be massive. and we are going to improve customer experience, and at the same time, we are going to reduce significant cost. Customer experience and virtual assistants, chatbots, and voice assistants are coming across a trend where some of the most powerful forces are aligning together. One, they're loved by end users, so there's no problem of adoption. We see with all of our customers, they launch it, our consumers adopt like crazy. Second, it is the area of the most massive investments for enterprises. They reserve most of their budgets for employee and customer experience as per Gartner itself. So that is a key trend force that is aligning. The third is the LLMs, the biggest change in technology, is completely aligned to providing that experience. So you have all these three forces combining together, and that's why you see the chatbots and virtual assistants out there, and that's why companies like us are seeing phenomenally rapidly growing interactions on our platforms.
Yeah. Amazing answer. So with that, then, I'm sure marketing is already freaking out at the amount of time left on the timer, or not left on the timer. We'll take a couple of questions. So if you have a question for the panel, this is your opportunity to broadcast your question to the world. So anybody?
Got one over here.
Regulatorily, how is the government addressing the use of AI to purchase stocks and to create wealth in nanoseconds, as opposed to holding up a piece of paper and say, sell, sell?
Anybody want to take that?
I do not know.
So I mean, like I said, the only real regulatory position that's been out there is clearly the AI Act out of Europe. I would definitely recommend that people read it. I think it's extremely well thought through about where they're thinking and where they're headed. I think to the broader question about some of the things you mentioned, I don't know that they've actually thought about that yet. Yeah. But it's a precursor to what potentially is out there. And so, like I said, you can find it on probably on ChatGPT or whatever. Just Google the AI Act out of Europe. And like I said, if you read that in level of detail, it really just talks about what they're trying to do from a positioning perspective around controlling the breadth and the nature of how AI is going to be used in everyday life, and ultimately the information that's required to manage it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was going to say, the one thing I would add to that is many of those financial systems, so if anybody's on Wealthfront or kind of robo-advisors, those are traditional data models that would be doing automatic trading. Like if you're buying in and just automatically putting a deposit in Wealthfront, like it's automatically managing and doing the trades. There's obviously data models that are going to be behind that. So I just think of the large language model as just a bigger, smarter, more flexible model. But
No, I was just going to say, I think you're going to see more of that. And we just saw the Hollywood Writers Guild have in their settlement protection against AI. So I think, it's all new to everyone or to a lot of folks on how do you manage that and what does that look like. I really like the idea of, when you had the slide where it had to cite its resources, right? Yeah. Like, where did you get that from? I think there should be a little more enforcement on that if you intend to take that material and use it in a way to monetize it.
Yep. I do like your example around the Writers Guild, because it was something that I was going to say, which is the way we legislate here in the United States is going to be on precedent based on lawsuits primarily, right? And then we'll come in behind it. I think the AI Act is a little bit kind of a gateway reaction from GDPR, right? So they're already on the hook saying this is what you have to do, and then AI is coming in and complicating it. So I almost feel like the AI Act is a bit of like sister legislation to GDPR, where they're already way more serious about it in Europe than we are here in the US. But I mean, I guess we'll figure out where that lands, right? Any other questions from the audience?
I don't deny the many benefits of AI, but I also think that the considerations are very real. And one of the ones I didn't see was cognitive decline. So I'm just curious, as these tools become more ubiquitous, especially for younger generations, is that at all a concern? And then also I'm curious if it would have any impact on developing EQ.
That's a really great question. Who wants to jump on that grenade?
I mean, I would say, listen, I think it's if we allow, it's I think the point you were making, which is how do you embrace it into the world in which we operate in, right? So teachers, for example, not allowing a student to leverage ChatGPT. There's a benefit and a negative, a positive and a negative, right? Positive is, okay, they're not getting the answers, they're not getting that cognitive design, they're not actually doing their own analytical thinking, but ultimately they're also missing out on how do you actually use technology and how to actually advance the capability. And maybe what ends up happening is that individual or student says, you know what, I could actually make this thing better, and here's how I'm going to make it better, right? So I think it's how we as individuals embrace the technology and allow it to essentially take over our lives, right? To a certain degree, if we all sit in front of Netflix and just keep taking the recommendations that they make, then that's on you as essentially taking a cognitive approach that says, you know what, I'm just not going to think. I'm just going to let Netflix decide everything I watch, what I do, so on and so forth. I think, for all of us, it's upon us to determine how we want the technology to interact and interface with us, and ultimately that will drive the cognitive approach. But I also see the opportunity. Like my mother has Alzheimer's, and my dad is having her leverage ChatGPT to help her be much more engaged with what's happening. And I see some positives because like things that she technically would not, because she can't vocalize as much anymore, but she can text, like she can read text.
Wow. And
so there's some benefits of the fact that she's able to now get answers to things that she's got questions about by just my father typing the answers onto ChatGPT, and she gets the response back. So
that's amazing.
It's an interesting dilemma, honestly.
It is. And Elisa, what I will add on that is, there was a great conversation in the communication panel last night that to me probably answers as much your question about EQ, right? Which is there's also a generational challenge we have right now with, AI is certainly exacerbating an already existing problem of the generational kind of decline of human interaction, right, as we go, and the more the ongoing desire to interact with the system in front of you. We have time for one more question, and it's Jim Glacken. Sorry, I'm sorry.
No Glacken. Had enough. The big thing about AI is the fear of using AI as bad actors, right? There's a lot of talk about, for instance, our power grid is compromised. But I would think that AI can actually equally be used to find bad actors and to thwart bad actors. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would totally agree with you on that. I mean, and that gets back to, how do we regulate? How do we do those things? What would be the components of that you could even track, like the chips or things along those lines? But, we have to, because we know that will be a scenario that we have to defend against. But I do want to go back really quick on the last one. So I think they should teach plagiarism in college, right? So, because once you get out of school, like for most of us, how many of us really create any unique slideware or any unique things that we're presenting to customers? We've evolved in a way that, it's acceptable to use our materials amongst ourselves, or we'll give it to partners, or, this kind of flow. Like, the same thing. Schools thought Cliff Notes was going to destroy, kids reading and critically thinking and summarizing books. But none of those things really happen. And I think we're going to see that with ChatGPT. I think that the youth of today is a lot smarter than we give them credit for. And maybe more of the regulation should be towards like social media. My daughter teaches in school, and she said she was auditing a class yesterday with 37, middle schoolers trying to learn science. And they had real tactical things, baleen whale stuff, all kinds of stuff they could do. Kids were on their phone. There was no control. The teacher just kept rambling on, and she said it just made her sick. So I think rather than being afraid, we need to embrace it and go run after it. And in all these other places, but especially in your business, because you guys are really on the forefront of being in the right place at the right time to capitalize on this. And as bewildered as some of us may be, and some of you, imagine where your customers are at that have been in contact center technology. Some of them are still using dark ages stuff, right? They're trying to figure out how to get their contact center to cloud, let alone what to do with AI. So that's, I think, the real opportunity here.
And I think that's a great breaking point, because we're over by 5-10 minutes at this point. So I'd like to thank all of you listening at home for tuning into this episode of The Bridge, and our live studio audience here in Palm Springs. Can we hear it? Let's hear you again. All right. This was a lot of fun. I don't know what the topic next year is going to be, but I think we'll do another one of these. This was great. And thanks for being a heavy topic early in the morning. Let's thank our panelists here, if you would. And certainly engage them early and often. And for those of you at home, we look forward to seeing you on another episode of The Bridge. Thanks. All right. Thanks, everybody. Great work. Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content. Or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepoint Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepoint, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointtechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepoint, or simply reach out to me at skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.